everyone. This is Elliott Serrano for the Chicago Red Eye and Geek to Me, coming to you once again from Challengers Comics and Conversations. And I have the distinct pleasure of being with the writer of Patsy Walker Hellcat and the writer also of Marvel's hit title Runaways, Kathryn Immonen. Am I saying that right?
You're saying that correct.
Correct. I would struggle with it. I would say, is it Immonen, Immonen? Where does the accent go?
It's on the first syllable. It's not my last name, so I'm just borrowing it.
Oh,
well.
Then there you go. Hey, can I borrow it too? I think I would get.
It's very common in Finland. So
really,
apparently,
I'm thinking what I lack in talent, I can make up with a pretty cool last name.
Sure. Well, it's like Smith, though.
Smith,
apparently.
Yeah. All right. But, of course, not in any way to imply that you don't have talent, because you are a very talented writer. In fact, you write what Patrick Brower here at Challengers says was one of Marvel's best books in 2008 and 9, Patsy Walker Hellcat. For those who haven't read that book yet, why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
You really ought to brief a girl. Hellcat, it's a part of the Initiative series. They send her to Alaska, and she fights a lot of big animals and kicks ass and makes friends with everybody. Am I allowed to say ass?
This is
now that
fine.
I've said it twice.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
For good measure. It's just a good, solid adventure series that really takes into account all the things that I love about Patsy Walker, which are not necessarily Hellcat things. You know, she's got a long, rich history before she was even brought into continuity with Marvel, and I think it's best not forgotten. She's got so much verve and stick-to-itiveness. You know, I mean, she survived the Second World War and she kicked Khrushchev in the butt, and so now she's doing it in Alaska. In Alaska,
and you wouldn't expect Alaska to be the place where you could find a whole lot of adventure. I mean, really, does being let's say, a superhero in Alaska give her foreign policy experience?
I can see America from my back door. I'm the president. Patsy doesn't really have any sort of substantive superpowers, and no matter what the story is, it has to be a magic story. And that was really probably the most important thing about trying to find a setting. So, I know that I did an interview with a teen newspaper run by teens up in Alaska, and I felt kind of bad because in the same way that I think a lot of Americans become irritated when America is nothing but New York.
Right.
In the same way, they're a little bit peevish, and understandably so, that Alaska is nothing but ice and snow. So, but for the purposes of my story, kinda,
Ice and snow, really? Okay.
So it was about finding a place that still had a tradition of magic. And, all things being equal, I would have been just as happy with, the Northwest Territories or, Inuvik or, something a little closer to my home. But it, it dovetailed nicely with the Initiative, which is also something that's, it's necessary. It needs to exist in continuity. It needs to, sort of gel with the rest of the Marvel Universe. And it was a nice fit. So that's why Alaska.
Yeah. And just so for those who might watch this blog and are not aware of what the Initiative is, we're talking about the 50-state initiative that was a result of the Civil War, where every state...
Not the actual Civil War.
Well, right. The Marvel Civil War, right. That would be cool, though, if after the actual Civil War, every state had superheroes. That would rock.
Yeah, it'd be great.
She thinks I'm crazy now.
That's a great idea.
Great idea? You should pitch that.
I should. I'll get right on that.
You're moving on to Runaways now, which has a pretty impressive pedigree. Of course, a title that was created by Brian K. Vaughan.
That's right.
After Brian K. Vaughan, Joss Whedon took over, and then Terry Moore after Joss. Tough act to follow.
I would say so.
So
for sure. Well, and tough too, because I'm also a huge fan of the book, and as much as no one ever wants to mess up a character or do something that's going to in any way sort of, and this is going to sound very crass, but damage the property. I mean, we're all sort of deeply invested in these characters having lives that can continue, and for them to continue to be useful into the future. You want to make them stronger, even if that means sort of, throwing bricks at them. You're still doing it with the best of intentions, right? Really big bricks.
That's a quote.
Yeah, you don't want to mess it up, right? And also because Runaways exists outside of Marvel continuity, it isn't because of that. In a lot of ways, it's more sort of a character-driven book. It needs to be maybe even stronger because if it doesn't tie in with other Marvel books, so you're not even going to get that segment of people who, normally read, Spider-Man or some other character, and when there are appearances of that character in another book, they'll pick it up. Mm-hmm. So Runaways doesn't even cross over really in that way. So yeah, for sure, tough act to follow, but I'm a huge fan of the book and was so shocked and amazed when they asked. So, and I said yes. I laughed and then I said yes.
What is it that you feel about your sensibility that you bring to the book that makes what will be, we hope to be, a very nice, long, and successful run on Runaways? What do you think you bring to the book that is going to set it apart from the previous writers?
I think I have a relatively unusual voice in terms of the writers that they have. I'm being a little bit disingenuous. I know why that is, but nevertheless, I think the way I write is a little bit different.
May I ask you to kind of elaborate on that? I know you don't want to. But the elephant in the room.
Yeah, exactly. I get asked a lot, what comics I read or what I read growing up, and for a lot of people working for Marvel and DC, it's like a dream come true. That's like the end game. That's the ultimate goal. And for a long time, I said, well, I didn't really read comics growing up. But then I realized that's absolutely not true because I have read thousands of pages of Archie, thousands of pages of Asterix and Tintin. Those were the comics that I grew up with. But for some reason, I didn't really sort of characterize them as such. So I think... that was part of my interest in Patsy Walker, too, was not, the stuff with the Avengers and the Defenders, although that's, lots of fun, and those are great books, but really what I knew her from was the romance comics of the 40s and 50s, and that's really where my great affection for those characters lies. And, a lot of those stories were really not very good. Right. They were sort of, hokey or badly written, and that's being generous in a lot of cases, but a lot of it was terrific, very sassy, very full of life, and a bit of a throwaway, too. The stakes were not that high, and I think that that's part of the way, I want to write. To have characters that... I think for a lot of these characters in this universe, if they really, thought hard about what was going on and what was at stake and what the implications were, no one would ever do anything. Right. So I'm interested in, having them really kind of shed that, like actively shed that, which makes them sort of lighter on their feet, which is, of course, not appropriate for everybody, but is appropriate for Patsy. But for the Runaways, I think that, anybody, if you're going to write the Runaways well, you have to sit down every morning and you have to really remember what it was like to be in high school, and that's because that's absolutely who these kids are. It's like the sort of ultimate high school, right? Because the parents are gone. Which brings with it its own kind of heartbreak because, we all want the love of our parents and, that is forever removed from them. So, but I think that's at the heart of it, that it's a teen book, it's a high school book, and you really just need to remember, how very Shakespearean all of that, seemed at the time.
Everything that will ever have any consequence in your life will happen in high school.
Absolutely. And the reason for that is because you haven't lived long enough to know that things get better. Right. And that's what growing up does to you. You have enough experience and you've lived long enough to know that you will live long enough to get past it. But when you're in it and you're 15, 16, whatever, you're never going to live long enough to get over,
Well, you have Romeo and Juliet as these great, role models for teen love.
Right.
If it didn't work for them, it can't work for anyone.
Well, it's funny because I'm sure a number of people have noticed that if Gert and Chase had actually gotten together, her name would be Gertrude Stein. So, I don't know what that says about their relationship or who Gert actually is or was, but yeah, I think it's telling. So.
We're here today doing a book signing at Challengers, and it's actually a fundraiser for the Anti-Cruelty Society, an animal shelter in the city of Chicago. Have any pets of your own?
I do. I have a dog. He's a cross between a beagle and a lab, and he's somebody's really bad idea. Yeah, that was not good planning. But we love him, so.
All right. Well, I can't think of a better note to end this on. Thank you, Kathryn.
Thank you very much
for taking the time.
Sure.
For Kathryn Immonen and Elliott Serrano here at Challengers Comics and Conversation. Thanks for joining us here on the Chicago Red Eyes Geek to Me.